My name is Nora Callahan, and I am 31 years old. The day Priya asked me to invest in her new business, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee. Same kitchen where I had sketched the entire concept 3 years earlier. Same counter where I had shown her every page of my notebook. Same mug she had given me as a birthday gift, the one with the chip on the handle that I never threw away because I do not throw away things that mattered to me. She called it Bloom and Company. I had called it Bloom. 6 words into her pitch, I set the mug down. I grew up in Clover Falls, Ohio. Small town. The kind where your 3rd grade teacher remembers your name at the grocery store 15 years later. I started making handmade skincare products in my mom's kitchen when I was 19. Beeswax, lavender oil, shea butter. Nothing fancy. But people bought them. Neighbors first. Then strangers. Then strangers who told strangers. By the time I was 24, I had a real idea. Not just products. A brand. Local ingredients sourced from small Ohio farms. Minimal packaging. A subscription model before subscription models were everywhere. I had the name, the logo concept, the supplier list, the pricing structure, and a 12-page business plan written by hand in a blue notebook. Priya was my best friend. Had been since sophomore year of college. She was sharp, social, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they had been waiting for her. I trusted her the way you trust someone who has seen you cry at 2 a.m. and showed up with food anyway. I showed her everything. Every page of that notebook. Every supplier contact. Every margin calculation. We sat on my apartment floor for 4 hours while I walked her through it. She asked good questions. I thought she was helping me think it through. She was taking notes I never saw. 3 months later, I lost my job. Accounting firm downsizing. 40 people gone in one afternoon. I spent the next 6 months surviving. Freelance work. Cutting expenses. The Bloom idea went into the drawer because rent did not care about my dreams. Priya was supportive. She checked in. Brought coffee. Said all the right things. I did not notice she had gone quiet about her own plans. I found out on a Tuesday. A mutual friend sent me a link. No message. Just a link. I clicked it on my phone standing in a parking lot. Bloom and Company. A skincare brand. Local Ohio farms. Minimal packaging. Subscription model. The logo was different. The name had 2 extra words. Everything else was mine. I sat in my car for 22 minutes. I did not call her. I did not text. I drove home, opened my drawer, took out the blue notebook. Dated entries going back 4 years. Supplier names with phone numbers. Margin sheets with my handwriting. Sketches of the logo concept. Everything time-stamped by the life I had lived while building it. I closed the notebook. Put it back in the drawer. Then I got to work. Not on confronting her. On building what was already mine. I reached out to 3 suppliers whose names were in my notebook. 2 of them had already signed with Bloom and Company. 1 had not. Her name was June Harmon, a lavender farmer in Medina County, 62 years old, who had been growing lavender on the same land for 30 years. She remembered my email from 2 years earlier. She said she had been waiting to see what happened with my idea. I signed with June on a Thursday. I filed the LLC paperwork on a Friday. I launched a small website on a Sunday with 12 products and a waitlist for the subscription box. I told no one. Priya called 4 weeks later. Casual. Warm. The same voice she had used for 10 years. She wanted to get lunch. Said she had something exciting to share. Said she thought of me immediately. We met at the diner on Carlisle Street. Booth by the window. She ordered first, the way she always did. Then she slid a folder across the table. Bloom and Company. Investment deck. She needed a small business partner. Someone she trusted. Someone who understood the vision. She said those words. The vision. I looked at the folder. Then at her face. Then back at the folder. I have been watching you build something that belongs to me, I said. Her smile held for about 2 seconds. Then it shifted. The way a wall shifts before it cracks. What are you talking about? I opened my bag. Took out the blue notebook. Set it on the table between us. Said nothing. She looked at it. I watched her remember every page. That was a general idea, Nora. Ideas are not owned. I closed my hand around my coffee mug. June Harmon is my supplier now, I said. The subscription model launched 3 weeks ago. I have 340 waitlist customers. The name is Bloom. Just Bloom. Silence. The kind where someone is calculating how much you know and how long you have known it. I picked up the notebook, put it back in my bag, left 2 20s on the table for the check, and stood up. I did not yell. I did not cry. I had used every feeling I had for something better than this conversation. That was 14 months ago. Bloom has 2,100 subscribers now. June Harmon's Lavender is on the label. A small grocery chain in Columbus picked us up last spring. The blue notebook sits on my desk under a glass paperweight my mother gave me. Bloom and Company closed 8 months ago. I read about it in a local business newsletter. 3 lines. No explanation. I did not feel satisfied. I did not feel vindicated. I just felt like someone who had built something from the ground up, the way she always intended, without anyone's permission, and without ever needing an investor who already knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. I had work to do. I still do. My name is Clara Devlin, and I am 34 years old. The morning I signed the purchase agreement for the building on Merchant Street, I used a pen I had bought for $3 at a pharmacy 2 blocks away. Nothing special. No ceremony. Just ink on paper and a notary who smelled like burnt coffee and asked me twice to initial the bottom right corner. The building had 7 tenants. Renata Sousa's marketing firm was on the 4th floor. I found out the same way I found out most things about Renata. Through someone else. A former colleague texted me a photo of the lease directory in the lobby. No message. Just the photo. I saved it, set my phone face down, finished my lunch, and went back to work. I grew up in Delwood, Pennsylvania. Row houses, corner stores, the kind of neighborhood where ambition was treated with mild suspicion. My mother cleaned offices downtown 3 nights a week. My father drove a delivery truck for 22 years until his back gave out. They were not dreamers. They were workers. They taught me the difference between the two and why the second one matters more. I wanted to work in real estate development. Not selling houses. Building things. Reviving dead commercial blocks. Taking buildings that had been written off and making them worth something again. I started as an assistant at a small development firm at 23. Answering phones, filing permits, learning every system from the bottom because the bottom was the only place that was hiring. Renata joined the firm 6 months after I did. She was polished in a way I was not. Business school. The right internships. The kind of resume that made senior partners nod before she finished her sentence. I did not resent her for it. I watched her and learned what I could. What I could not learn was why she decided I was worth dismissing. It started small. A comment in a team meeting about my presentation being too basic. A laugh in the break room when I mentioned I was studying for my broker's license at night. A phone call I was not supposed to hear, her voice carrying through a door that was not fully closed. She is not cut out for this. She is trying, but there is a ceiling and she is already pressing against it. Some people just do not have the instinct. Some people. I was 25. I had never missed a deadline. I had never handed in work that was not complete. I had stayed late 43 times in 6 months because I counted. Not for recognition. Because the work needed doing and I was the one who understood it. She said those words to a senior partner who respected her opinion. 6 weeks later, I was passed over for a promotion I had been told to expect. I did not confront her. I did not update my resume out of anger. I sat at my desk the morning after the announcement, opened the permit filing I had been working on, and finished it. Then I started the next one. Then the one after that. I left the firm 14 months later. Not because I was pushed. Because I was ready. I spent the next 4 years building a small portfolio of distressed commercial properties in secondary markets. Nothing glamorous. Empty storefronts in mid-sized cities that developers with larger appetites had ignored. I learned which buildings had good bones by walking them myself. I learned which neighborhoods were turning before the numbers showed it. I made mistakes. 2 of them were expensive. I absorbed them and kept moving. By 29, I had a business. By 31, it had a name that people in certain rooms recognized. By 33, a regional development journal ran a profile. Half a page. A photo of me standing in front of a renovated property in Cartwell that had been a derelict warehouse 18 months earlier. Renata's firm had passed on that same property 2 years before I bought it. I know because the seller told me. The building on Merchant Street came available through a contact I had built slowly over 7 years. An older investor who was consolidating his portfolio and wanted a clean sale to someone who would manage it well. We had coffee twice. He asked good questions. I answered them honestly. We closed in 31 days. The 4th floor tenant was informed of the ownership change by standard letter. I did not call Renata. I did not send a personal note. I did not engineer a moment. The letter went out with all the others on a Wednesday afternoon, signed with my name, on letterhead I had built from nothing. She called my office 3 days later. My assistant took the message. Clara, this is Renata Souza from Souza Creative on 4. Just calling to introduce myself to the new ownership. Please have her call me back. I read the message slip. Set it on my desk. Looked at it for about 10 seconds. Then I wrote a short note back through my assistant. Thank you for reaching out. All tenant matters are handled through our property management team. Here is their contact information. Best regards. That was it. No speech. No confrontation. No moment where I watched her face register what had happened. I had stopped needing that somewhere around the 3rd year of building something real. The satisfaction I used to imagine, the look on her face, the silence in the room, it had been replaced by something quieter and more permanent. A portfolio that spoke before I entered any room. My mother visited the Merchant Street building last fall. She stood in the lobby and looked at the directory for a long time. Then she looked at me. You own this whole thing? Every floor, I said. She nodded the way she nodded when she was trying not to cry. We took the elevator to the top floor. Stood at the window and looked out over the city. She pointed at things. Asked questions. Held her purse with both hands the way she always does when she is somewhere that feels important. I did not point out the 4th floor on the way down. I had work to do. I still do. My name is Sarah Whitfield and I am 33 years old. The night I received the Regional Arts Foundation Award, I stood at a podium in a room of 400 people and kept my eyes on the back wall. Not because I was nervous. Because I had been told, 30 minutes before the ceremony, that Danny Flores was in the audience. 3rd row. Left side. Navy dress. I had not seen her in 4 years. I finished my speech in 6 minutes. Thanked my mentor. Thanked my team. Said something about persistence that I meant more than anyone in that room could have understood. Then I walked off the stage, shook 3 hands, accepted a glass of water I did not drink, and stood in the exact center of who I had become without her. I met Danny when I was 22. We were both in the same graduate program for visual arts in Portland. She was from Miami, loud in the best way, the kind of person who made a room feel inhabited. I was from a small town in eastern Oregon where the arts was something you did in your spare time after the real work was finished. She made me feel like the work was the real thing. We shared a studio space for 2 years. Same hours, same bad coffee, same arguments about color theory at midnight. I painted. She photographed. Our work was different enough that we never competed, or so I believed. I was wrong about that last part. My thesis project was a series of 12 large-scale paintings based on interviews I had conducted with elderly women in rural Oregon. Their faces, their hands, their kitchens. The stories they told me became the color palette. I spent 14 months on it. I have the notebooks to prove it. Dates, names, interview recordings, color studies, failed versions I kept because failure is documentation too. I showed Danny everything. She was my closest friend. She sat with me through the difficult paintings, the ones where I could not find the right light. She brought food when I forgot to eat. She said things like, "This is the best work you have done," and I believed her because she had never lied to me. Or I had never caught her. 3 months before my thesis show, Danny submitted a grant application to the Callaway Arts Foundation. A significant grant. $30,000 for emerging artists. The application included a project proposal. The project was mine. Not similar. Not inspired by. Mine. The rural women. The interview methodology. The focus on hands and domestic space as emotional record. She had changed the medium to photography and the geography to Florida. But the architecture of the idea, the bones of it, were built from 14 months of my work and every conversation we had in that shared studio. She received the grant. I found out from a mutual classmate who assumed I already knew. I did not already know. I sat with it for 3 days before I said anything to her. Not because I was unsure. Because I needed to be certain I was not about to say something I could not take back, and I wanted everything I said to be something I meant completely. When I finally called her, she answered on the second ring. She said my name like a question. I told her what I knew. I did not raise my voice. I used the word borrowed without calling it stealing because I wanted to hear what she would say when given the most generous possible framing. She said ideas are shared between friends. She said the methodology was different. She said I was being territorial about a concept that was never exclusively mine. She said those words. Never exclusively mine. I hung up. Not in anger. With the clean finality of someone who has just received the information they needed. I did not contact the foundation. I did not pursue it formally. I had a thesis show in 3 months, and every hour I spent on a fight I might not win was an hour taken from work that was undeniably, documentably, completely mine. The show opened on a Thursday in May. Danny did not come. The thesis committee called it the most emotionally precise work they had seen from a graduate student in a decade. One professor used the word irreplaceable. I wrote it down that night not out of vanity but because I needed evidence that what she had taken was real and what remained was still enough to build on. I stayed in Portland. Took a residency. Then a teaching position. Then a studio of my own on the east side of the city, ground floor, north-facing windows. The kind of light that is honest about everything. I kept making work. Series after series. The women from Eastern Oregon led to a broader project about invisible labor. That project traveled to 4 cities. The 4th city was where the Regional Arts Foundation noticed it. The award was announced 6 weeks before the ceremony. My name in a press release. My work described in language that matched every notebook entry I had made in that graduate studio 11 years earlier. Danny sent a congratulations text the day the announcement went out. 4 words. A single emoji. I read it. Set my phone down. Went back to work. At the ceremony I gave my speech, shook my hands, accepted my water. Then the room opened into a reception and I moved through it the way I move through everything now. With intention and without hurry. She found me near the window. She looked the same. Navy dress. The same smile she used when she wanted something to land softly. Sarah. Congratulations. This is so deserved. I looked at her the way you look at something you once thought was essential and have since learned to live without. Thank you for coming, I said. Nothing else. No scene. No speech. No moment where I handed her the weight of what she had done and asked her to finally carry it. I had already put that weight into 12 paintings that hung in 4 cities. It had been doing the work for years. I turned back to the room. Found my mentor. Accepted another glass of water. This one I drank. The award sat on my studio shelf by Monday morning. Next to the notebooks. Same shelf. Same light. I had work to do. I still do. My name is Jess Harmon, and I am 29 years old. The email went out on a Tuesday morning at 8:47. I know the exact time because I checked the sent folder 3 times before I closed my laptop and drove to work. 41 recipients. Every department head, every senior colleague, every mutual professional contact Maura Lindell and I had shared over 3 years of working in the same building, breathing the same recycled office air, smiling at each other across the same conference table. I did not write the email. Maura did. I just made sure the right people finally read it. I grew up in Harwick, Minnesota. Middle child of 3. My mother was a school librarian who believed that information was the only thing no one could take from you once you had it. My father repaired appliances in a shop he owned for 30 years. He used to say a thing either works or it does not. There is no middle ground in a machine. I carried both of those things into every job I ever had. I started at Callum and Reed Communications when I was 25. Mid-sized firm. Corporate clients, event coordination, internal communications work. Not glamorous but solid. The kind of place where if you worked carefully and consistently, people noticed. I worked carefully and consistently. People noticed. Maura Lindell had been there 4 years when I arrived. She was good at her job. Organized, articulate, the kind of colleague who always knew which meeting was happening in which room and who would be in a good mood and who would not. She welcomed me my first week. Showed me where the good coffee was. Introduced me to people whose names I had not yet learned. I trusted her earlier than I should have. The first sign was small enough to dismiss. A comment from a colleague in my 3rd month. Something about how Maura had mentioned I was struggling to adjust. I was not struggling. I had just reorganized the entire client filing system and my supervisor had thanked me in front of the team. I mentioned this to Maura casually. She laughed it off. Said she had only expressed concern, that she had meant it kindly. I believed her. The second sign came 6 months later. I was passed over for a project lead position I had been told I was being considered for. The reason given was vague. Something about fit and timing. I found out 2 weeks later from a colleague who felt guilty staying quiet that Maura had told the project director I had complained about the account privately. That I had called it beneath my skill level. I had never said that. Not once. Not to anyone. I went home that evening, sat at my kitchen table, and wrote down everything I could remember. Dates, comments, moments where something had shifted in a room when I walked in. I filled 4 pages. Then I kept going to work. I did not confront Maura. I did not report her. I did not tell my supervisor, because I had nothing except 4 handwritten pages, and a pattern that felt damning to me but would sound like sensitivity to anyone else. What I did was start keeping records. Every meeting, every project, every interaction that seemed ordinary and every one that did not. I noted dates and times. I saved emails. I kept a folder on my personal laptop, backed up in 2 places, that grew steadily over the next 2.5 years. The lies kept coming. I learned to recognize the aftermath before I understood the cause. A coldness from someone who had been warm. A meeting I was left off. A piece of work I had done that appeared in a presentation without my name. Each time I traced it back carefully. Each time the thread led to the same place. Maura was meticulous. I will give her that. She never wrote anything down. It was always a word in a hallway, a tone in a meeting, a suggestion dropped casually into someone else's thinking. Lies that dissolved before you could hold them. Until she made one mistake. In January of my 3rd year she sent an email. It was meant for one person. A senior director named Paul Chung who had just joined the firm and was forming his core team. The email was a character summary of several colleagues he might consider professional assessments. The kind of thing that sounds helpful until you read what it says about you. About me it said this: Jess Harmon is capable on paper but difficult in practice. She resists collaboration and takes credit for shared work. I would be cautious about giving her client-facing responsibility until you have seen how she handles pressure. I have observed this firsthand over 3 years. Paul Chung replied to Mara and accidentally copied me. I read it on my phone in the parking garage at 7:14 in the morning. Sat in my car. Read it again. Then a third time. Then I opened my folder and sat with 3 years of documentation and 1 accidental email and understood that the middle ground Mara had operated in for years had just disappeared. I did not reply to Paul. I did not forward the email that day. I spent 2 weeks organizing everything I had into a single clear document. Chronological. Factual. No emotion. No interpretation. Just dates and events and the pattern they formed when placed in sequence. I attached Mara's email at the top. Then I sent it. 41 recipients. Every person whose perception of me she had quietly shaped for 3 years. I was in the parking lot when the first response came. Paul Chung. 4 sentences. He apologized for the accidental copy. He said the email I had sent was thorough and troubling. He said he would be in touch. HR called before noon. Mara was placed on administrative leave the following week. I was not in the meeting where it happened. I was at my desk finishing a client brief that was due at end of day. It needed to be done. I was the one who understood it. 3 months later I was offered the project lead position. Different project, same level. I accepted without ceremony. Sent a professional reply. Then closed the email and went back to work. My mother used to say information is the only thing no one can take from you once you have it. Mara had spent 3 years building a version of me out of words no one ever wrote down. I spent 3 years building a version of the truth that could not be argued with. One of us was right about how information works. I still have the folder. I do not open it anymore. I have work to do. My name is Audrey Voss and I am 31 years old. The client recognized my work before I said a single word. I was sitting in the 3rd chair on the left side of the conference table. Not presenting. Not even scheduled to be in that meeting. I was there because my supervisor had asked me to bring printed copies of the quarterly report and stay in case additional materials were needed. A background role. The kind where you sit quietly and do not speak unless spoken to. Celeste Marsh was at the head of the table. She was presenting my concept as the culmination of 6 months of her own creative development. I set the printed reports down in the center of the table and took my seat and said nothing. I grew up in Fallbrook, Oregon. My father taught high school English for 31 years. My mother ran a small alterations shop out of our garage. She could look at a garment for 45 seconds and tell you exactly what was wrong with it and precisely how to fix it. She had an eye for things that did not fit. I inherited that from her, though it took me years to understand what it was good for. I went into brand strategy because I believed that the way a company told its story determined everything that followed. Not the product. Not the price. The story. I was particular about it in a way that made some people impatient with me and made clients feel understood. Both reactions told me I was doing something right. I joined Hartwell Creative Group at 27. Celeste Marsh was a senior strategist. 8 years ahead of me in the industry, well-connected, the kind of professional whose name appeared on award submissions and industry panels. She was assigned as my informal mentor during my first year. I was grateful. I told her so. She asked good questions. The kind that made me think she was helping me develop my ideas when she was actually developing her understanding of them. The Varden account was a mid-sized lifestyle brand looking to reposition for a younger demographic. It came to Hartwell in the spring. Significant contract. The kind that generated internal competition between senior and junior staff alike. I was not expected to pitch. Junior strategists rarely did on accounts this size. But I had an idea. I had been thinking about it for 3 months before the Varden account arrived, working it out in a notebook I kept in my bag. A brand narrative framework built around the concept of accumulated identity. The idea that people do not choose brands that reflect who they are but brands that reflect who they are becoming. Aspirational without being dishonest. The framework had a name, a visual language, a 3-phase implementation structure. I showed it to Celeste on a Wednesday afternoon in March. Her office. Door closed. I walked her through every page. She asked careful questions. Took no notes that I could see. Said it was genuinely innovative and that I should develop it further before presenting it formally. I developed it further. 2 weeks later she told me the Varden pitch timeline had moved up and the senior team was handling it internally. She said my framework was interesting but not yet ready for a client-facing presentation. She said these things warmly, with the tone of someone protecting me from embarrassment. I thanked her. I went back to my desk and kept working on other accounts and did not think about the Varden pitch again until my supervisor asked me to bring reports to the presentation 3 weeks later. The client was a woman named Sandra Okafor, creative director at Varden. Sharp, direct, the kind of person who listened to a pitch the way my mother looked at a garment. 45 seconds and she knew exactly what fit and what did not. Celeste was 20 minutes into the presentation when Sandra stopped her. She held up one hand. Not rude. Precise. This framework, Sandra said. The accumulated identity model. Where did it originate? Celeste did not pause long enough for anyone else to notice. But I noticed. A half second where her eyes moved to the table and came back. It developed organically through our team's research process, Celeste said. Sandra looked at the slide. Then she looked around the table. Her eyes settled on me. Were you part of the research process? I was aware of every person in that room. The quality of the silence. The specific weight of what was happening. I developed the framework, I said. I have the original documentation if that would be helpful. Celeste's expression did not collapse. She was too practiced for that. But something behind it shifted the way a wall shifts when the foundation underneath has moved. Sandra looked at Celeste. Then back at me. I would like to see it, she said. I opened my bag. I had brought my notebook that morning without knowing why. The same notebook I always brought. Dated entries going back 4 months before the Varden account existed. The framework mapped out in my own handwriting on pages that could not have been written after the pitch was built. I set it on the table in front of Sandra Okafor. She read for 4 minutes without speaking. The room stayed quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when everyone understands something has changed but no one is certain what comes next. Then she closed the notebook, slid it back to me, and looked at my supervisor. I would like Audrey to lead the Varden account, she said. If that is something Hartwell can arrange. My supervisor said yes before Sandra finished the sentence. I did not look at Celeste. I picked up my notebook, placed it back in my bag, folded my hands on the table. Kept my face the way my mother kept her hands when she worked. Steady. Focused. Already 3 steps ahead of the current moment. Celeste left Hartwell 6 weeks later. The departure was described internally as mutual and amicable. I was not asked for my perspective and did not offer it. The Varden account ran 18 months. Sandra Okafor extended it twice. At the close of the second extension, she sent a handwritten note to my supervisor calling the accumulated identity framework the most useful strategic tool her team had encountered in a decade. My supervisor framed it and put it on the wall outside his office. I saw it every morning when I walked in. It looked exactly right. I had work to do. I still do. My name is Lena Marsh and I am 29 years old. The contract was 43 pages. I signed each one in the same place, bottom right corner, initials on the tabs, full signature on the finals. My hand was steady. The pen was one I had owned for 6 years, a simple black ballpoint I bought at a drugstore the week I moved to Nashville with $200 and a duffel bag and the specific kind of determination that only comes from having nothing left to protect. The label's A&R director slid the last page across the table and smiled. I signed it and thought about Corinne. I grew up in Sutter Creek, California. Small town in the foothills. The kind of place where Friday nights meant high school football and everyone knew your parents by their first names. Music was everywhere in my house. My grandmother played piano by ear. My mother sang in the church choir every Sunday for 30 years with the consistency of someone who understood that showing up mattered more than being noticed. I started writing songs at 14. Not performing. Writing. Filling notebooks with lyrics the way other kids filled journals. Melodies I heard in my head that I would hum into my phone recorder at 2 in the morning so I would not lose them by morning. I was not a prodigy. I was not the girl everyone pointed to and said watch her. I was the girl in the back of the room who was always working on something nobody else could see yet. Corinne Bale sat next to me in sophomore English. She had a voice that made people stop talking. Clear and effortless, the kind of natural instrument that draws attention without trying. We became friends the way you become friends at 16, quickly and completely, with the assumption that it would last forever because you do not yet know the things that end friendships. We started playing open mics together at 19. Her voice, my songs. It worked in the way that complementary things work before one person decides the arrangement is no longer convenient. People responded to her. She was the one they watched. I was the one whose name they forgot to ask. I told myself it did not matter because the songs were mine and the songs were what lasted. Corinne told me something different. It was a Tuesday in October, the month we both turned 22. We were in her apartment after a showcase that had not gone the way either of us hoped. A label representative had attended. He had spoken briefly to Corinne afterward and not at all to me. She had a glass of wine. I had coffee. We were supposed to be debriefing the way we always did, honestly and without ego. She set her glass down and looked at me with the expression of someone who has decided that what they are about to say is a kindness. Lena, I think you need to hear this. Your songs are fine. They are competent. But competent is not enough in this industry. You do not have the instinct for what connects. I've been thinking about it for a while and I think you are holding yourself back by believing you are more talented than you are. Maybe songwriting is not your path. Fine. Competent. Not your path. I finished my coffee. Rinsed the mug. Put on my jacket. I told her I appreciated her honesty. I meant neither word. I drove home, sat at my kitchen table, opened the notebook I was working in at the time, and wrote for 3 hours. Not because I was inspired. Because she had just told me I could not, and the only response I knew how to make to that was to keep going. I moved to Nashville 4 months later. Alone. No connections. No plan beyond a list of publishing houses I had researched and a folder of 37 songs I had written over 8 years. I took a job at a recording studio doing administrative work. Answering phones, booking sessions, making coffee for producers whose names I had read in liner notes since I was 15. I listened to everything. I kept writing. Mornings before work. Nights after. Weekends in a practice room I rented by the hour from a musician who lived 2 floors above me. The songs got better. Not because I became more talented. Because I worked in the specific way that people work when they have been told they cannot and have decided to use that as fuel instead of a verdict. A producer named Gil Hartman heard a demo I left at a publishing meeting 3 years into my time in Nashville. He called me on a Thursday. Said he wanted to hear more. I sent him 14 songs that weekend. He called back on Monday. We worked together for 2 years. Slowly, carefully. He was not the kind of producer who rushed. Neither was I. In that time, Corinne had moved to Nashville as well. I knew because the industry in that city is smaller than it appears. She had signed with a management company. She had meetings with 2 labels. Both passed. I heard about it the way you hear about things in small industries, through 3 degrees of connection and a mutual contact who assumed I already knew. The label that signed me had passed on Corinne 8 months earlier. I did not know this when I walked into the meeting. Gil told me afterward in the parking lot, Matter-of-factly, the way he delivered all information. They looked at her last fall, he said. Did not feel the songwriting was strong enough. I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked him what time we were expected in the studio Thursday. The signing dinner was quiet. My parents drove up from California. My mother wore the dress she wore to my grandmother's piano recitals. My father shook Gil's hand for slightly too long, the way fathers do when they are trying not to cry in a professional setting. I have a photograph from that evening. My parents on either side of me. The contract in a folder on the table. My pen in my hand. I look like someone who has been working toward a specific point for 7 years and has finally arrived and is not surprised, only grateful and ready. Corinne sent a message 3 days after the announcement went public. 2 sentences. Congratulations, this is big. You worked hard for it. I read it once. Set my phone down. Opened the notebook I was currently filling. Page 41 of a new batch of songs I had promised Gil by the end of the month. They were better than anything I had written before. They always were, compared to last time. I had work to do. I still do.